I so move.
Second.
Aye.
Aye.
So moved.
I'll second. Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the HRA. The consent calendar, for those in the audience, is an agenda of several separate items which are acted on by the HRA in one motion. Once the consent calendar has been approved, the individual items and the recommended actions will also have been approved, and no further HRA action on those items is necessary. Tonight we've got 4 items on the consent calendar, starting off with consideration of the approval of the adjustment of payment standard for the Section 8 Rental Assistance Program. Item B is consideration of the approval of a resolution authorizing the Executive Director and HRA Chair to execute instruments necessary to purchase 3 to 4 vacant and foreclosed houses using up to $300,000 from the Housing and Redevelopment Fund through December 31st, 2014. Item C is consideration of the approval of the use of funds budgeted for the Home Energy Squad Enhancement Program to write down the cost of home energy visits for qualified low-income households. And finally, item D, consideration of the approval of a resolution authorizing the purchase of real property located at 7029 Nicollet Avenue South through the Richfield Rediscovered Program. And that concludes tonight's consent calendar.
I'll move the calendar. Second.
Aye.
Aye.
Item number 4 is consideration of granting authorization to the HRA Executive Director to execute documents releasing the minimum assessment agreement for eligible housing units in the Kensington Park development. And I'm going to ask John Stark to explain this particular item to the HRA and to the audience.
Thank you, Chair Sandall and Commissioners. The contract for private redevelopment associated with the Kensington Park development required the adoption of an assessment agreement for the 108 housing units that are included in the development. That assessment agreement was approved by the HRA in September of 2003, roughly the same time that the contract for private redevelopment was approved, as well as the tax increment financing district. The intent of the assessment agreement is that it would only affect the property as long as it was owned by the entity who had originally purchased the property from the developer, and that it would, and I'm quoting here, terminate with respect to each such housing unit upon the sale of such unit to a bona fide good faith purchaser. A subsequent repurchaser has contacted the HRA staff to ask that the assessment agreement affecting their housing unit be released. It is anticipated that other such requests will be made in the future. Staff is recommending that the HRA grant blanket authorization to the Executive Director to execute all documents pertaining to the release of these assessment agreements in the future, rather than addressing them on a one-by-one basis as independent HRA actions. HRA attorney Julie Eddington has provided a memorandum, which is attached, that recommends this action, as well as a sample release of minimum assessment agreement, which is also attached. Ms. Eddington has also concluded that it is the homeowner's responsibility to request and record these releases. As each release becomes effective, the taxes and the related TIF for that unit will likely decrease. It will be difficult to quantify the effect of these releases on the tax increment because we do not know how the Hennepin County Assessor's Office will value the properties, and we do not know the number and timing of when other property owners may request such a release. Right now with this TIF district, the HRA collects 25% of the tax increment. Of that, 15% of the total goes into the Housing and Redevelopment Fund, which funds a lot of our, I believe this is the case. I'll double check, but I believe it's 15% that goes into the Housing and Redevelopment Fund to fund a lot of our housing programs, and then 10% goes to administrative costs, offset some of the costs we incurred when we established the TIF district and doing our annual reporting and things like that. So our portion of the TIF will likely decrease. What we're going to look for is if there's a pattern of these occurring, so we can say, well, roughly 10 of these occur a year or 15 a year. And if we also see a pattern for how the assessor is revaluing the properties, if we can see those patterns, then we can try to put numbers to how this will affect us. In the grand scheme of things, it is something that we're anticipating, and we don't think it's going to have any, huge detrimental effect.
Any questions or comments? I will move that we HRA Executive Director to execute documents releasing the minimum assessment agreement for eligible housing units in the Kensington Park development. Is there a second?
Second.
And then I have a question, comment. This is the first time I remember seeing this. Has it come around before? I don't recall it.
Well, we had the same reaction. We were skeptical that this can't be the first time one of these units is resold, but it certainly isn't the first time one of these units is resold. It is the first time a homeowner has, actually reviewed their paperwork, to determine that this is something that they can do. As I say in the staff report, it's really the homeowner's responsibility, and you would hope at closing that their title company would note this as well. But does seem to be the first time this has come up.
Interesting. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Call the question. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, next item is number 5. Mr. Devich.
Thank you, Chair Sandal, members of the HRA. Item number 5 is consideration of program guidelines for the rental to home ownership program. And basically, this is our attempt to take a look at improving residential neighborhoods by encouraging rental programs, rental homes, that is, to go into home ownership. And I'm going to ask Karen Barton to explain the staff report.
Thank you, Chair Sandal and Commissioners. As Executive Director Devich said, in an effort to stabilize and improve our residential neighborhoods, the Housing and Redevelopment Authority approved $30,000 in the 2014 budget year to develop a pilot program that would offer incentives to aid in returning single-family rental properties to owner-occupied properties. From 2000 to 2013, the number of single-family rentals in the city has grown from 76 to 673.
Wow.
So there's been a dramatic increase over the last decade. Based on feedback from 2 surveys that we had sent out to rental property owners of single-family homes, staff is recommending approval of the attached program guidelines for the rental to home ownership program. The program would offer a $2,000 incentive grant to sellers to offset a portion of the closing costs associated with the sale of the property, and either a $7,000 purchase assistance loan or a $10,000 rehab assistance loan to the buyers. The loan term would be for a period of 10 years with 0 interest and no monthly payments. It would be contingent upon the buyer owning and occupying the home continuously during that time. After the 10-year period, the loan would be forgiven. The funding for this pilot program provides for 3 properties, 2 purchase assistant and 1 rehab assistance to be returned to owner occupancy. The proposed program, as I mentioned, would offer incentives to both sellers and to buyers. The loan term is 10 years with 0 interest, as long as the buyer continues to own and occupy the home. 10% equity is required for the buyer, not including the HRA loan. Buyers would also be given the option to attend a home buyer education class, and if they did so, would be reimbursed up to $50 for the cost of the class. Sellers would need to have a current rental license and be in good standing with the city, and have that rental license in place for a minimum of 12 months prior to application to the program. And sellers must maintain their rental license and remain in good standing with the city during marketing and up to the point of the sale of the property. The property, this program as a pilot is just looking at single or 2-family residences at this point, and there is no income restriction associated with the program. With that, I would be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Karen, is it, when you're saying single-family residences, you're talking about standalone homes or duplexes, not condos or co-ops or?
That's correct.
Um,
Karen?
Has this program been in the same form or slightly modified form been tried in other cities, and what has their result been?
I am not aware of a program like this being tried in any other city.
Richfield
So,
leads the way
yeah,
again.
we're gonna be,
Oh, yeah.
that's why we budgeted a smaller amount and just kind of doing it as a pilot program this year to see how
It'll
it
be
works
interesting
and
to
work
see.
through bugs.
Keep us informed when we have a couple, see how popular it is.
Mhm.
This is-
Absolutely.
How are we going to be marketing this?
We'll be doing a direct outreach to the single-family rental property owners. That was also the list that we had sent out these surveys to, and got good response from them. There were quite a number who expressed interest in the program. And then we'll also be marketing to realtors who work in and for the city of Richfield. And I'll put in a plug right now for our realtor workshop that's coming up on Wednesday this week.
Yeah, go ahead.
If there seems to be a bigger interest than what we have budgeted for, is there a possibility that you'll come back to us to try to expand the program? Or are we kind of thinking next year we would expand it, or?
We would look at expanding it next year then, and it would also give us an opportunity to see if there's any bugs that we need to kind of work out.
Okay.
Excellent. Anyone else? Questions?
I have a comment. It sort of, in some ways, reminds me of, the incentive program from the Obama administration to get houses moving, and I know in my condo association, a lot of condos got sold as a result of that incentive, and I would hope that this same kind of incentive would move some of these houses along.
Okay. Anyone else? All right, if not, does anyone wish to move this item?
I'll move the item.
Is there a second? Second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Aye, opposed, motion carries.
I want to be an abstainer.
Oh, we have one abstention, okay. All right, so that was item number 5. Number 6, Mr. Davich?
Thank you, Chair Sandall, members of the HRA. Item number 6 is consideration of authorization to designate 5 lots purchased under the new home program as Richfield Rediscovered Program lots. And we had some discussion about something like that a meeting or two ago, and I think this is kind of a follow-up to it, and I'll ask John Stark to make that summary.
Yeah, thank you. The discussion that we had was on January 22nd, and at that meeting, we were before you with selling some lots to Habitat for Humanity. And at that meeting, the HRA asked staff to determine whether lots that were purchased by the HRA for the construction of new affordable homes as part of the new home program could be redesignated for inclusion in the Richfield Rediscovered Program for the construction of market rate housing. Now, it's clear that any properties purchased with federal community development block grant funds must be sold to households meeting income requirements. For the remainder of the properties, though, staff has concluded that although the acquisition of homes for the new home program were specifically included in the budgetary approval for that program, and approval of the acquisition of those properties was for the stated intent of affordable housing, the HRA may authorize the sale of those properties as part of the Richfield Rediscovered Program. 5 such lots which were purchased for the intent of inclusion in the new home program would be eligible to be marketed for sale under Richfield Rediscovered. They are 6637 Fifth Avenue, 6345 Bloomington Avenue, 7225 First Avenue, and 6416 16th Avenue, which is a double lot. The remainder of the new home program lots were purchased with CDBG and could not be converted. I would say part of why we're asking you to do this as a formal action is that is for auditing purposes. When the auditors come, a lot of times they will just grab a file and work backwards from that. And our fear was that they would grab a file and find approvals for developing this for affordable housing, and then only to find that ultimately it was sold to a household not meeting affordability requirements. These are all based on your own policies. You can change them. We just thought it would be safer for you to do that formally.
Would these then be marketed, I'm sorry. Would these then be marketed along with the other Richfield rediscovered lots?
Yes.
Okay, and what's our inventory there? Is it, it's not many, is it?
No.
One or something?
Mhm.
I can tell you in a second.
There's one left.
That's what I thought it was.
Yeah, that's why we were inquiring.
We may have one or two left.
Yeah.
So yes.
Okay.
You know, I don't want to say that we cherry pick the lots for Richfield rediscovered, but typically, if a lot is a wider lot, it is more often targeted to Richfield rediscovered. If it's a narrower lot, that would more likely accommodate a smaller house. We targeted those for the new home program and other similar kinds of things. So it may be that these won't be as attractive to Richfield rediscovered buyers as some previous lots were. If that's the case, we'll just revisit it. You know, we'll report back to you in a year and tell you what the interest in these lots have been for RR. And you may say, well, we're willing to consider affordable new homes on them as well. But until you tell us otherwise, we will market these as RR homes.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else have anything? All right. Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to authorize staff to designate 5 lots purchased under the new home program as Richfield rediscovered program lots.
And I'll second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Thank you. Item number 7, Mr. Devich.
Item number 7, Chair Sandal, members of the HRA, is consideration of adoption of a senior housing policy to assist in guiding future senior housing development in the city of Richfield. We have done some work in getting input in what senior housing might be and what housing policy might be for the community. This is the first shot at a housing policy, and I'll ask John Stark to make that presentation to the HRA.
Thank you. You know, on this item, I'm really more the messenger than anything. We took the rental housing study that was presented to you and the Planning Commission and the City Council. We took that to the Housing Visioning Work Group and asked them to recommend some policy items to you. Their recommendation is attached exactly the way they worded it. In our recommendation to you, which is on page 2 of the staff report, we have bullets there. I think on one item, we softened the language a little bit, but I believe all the other items are pretty much exactly the same. I'm just going to read through the bullets. One is the inclusion of lower density senior housing in the community. Well, let me back up with kind of a preamble. When considering proposals for senior housing, the HRA shall evaluate proposals based on the following criteria. 1, the inclusion of lower density senior housing, as an example, attached and detached townhomes. Number 2, if the proposed project includes high density senior housing, does it provide a continuum of care within the project, including independent living, assisted living, and memory care accommodations when feasible? Number 3, consideration should be given to the location of the proposed project, how it does or does not lend itself to providing a geographic balance of senior housing throughout the city, and to avoid concentrations of senior housing. Number 5, further concentration of senior housing should be avoided at the Lakes at Lyndale area, also known as 66th Street in Lyndale. Number 6, senior housing proposals in the Cedar Point 2 housing area should be considered. And that's the one I said we soften the language a little bit, I thought. Yeah, I think originally the group used the words should be strongly considered. And so we took the word strongly out and just said considered. The next bullet, can the senior housing project readily convert to serve other populations in the future as the market dictates? Next, feasibility of the project based on a market survey conducted on behalf of the HRA, and feedback obtained through one or more town hall meetings held jointly by the HRA and the developer to garner input from residents regarding the proposed development, ideally held in locations near the proposed development. And finally, work with the existing senior developments to continue to update, upgrade, and meet community needs. As I said, this came from the Housing Visioning Task Force. We do have one member of the task force here tonight. And Karen Barton was at the task force meeting at which this was discussed as well. So they might be able to add some more detail.
Okay.
Madam
Yes,
Chair.
go ahead.
And I had a chance to read this today and everything like this. And first of all, there's some things in here that I really like, that I think are very insightful, and I appreciate the hard work. There are some things, however, that I am concerned that they are way too prescriptive and that they don't serve us 20 and 30 years down the road when we're talking about policy. And I'm looking at a broader scope of policy. And even with the senior housing being this is a senior piece, I don't see the scope in the whole housing piece. And my concern, of course, is making sure that when we look at senior housing, that we look at it in the broad scope of the entire city and all the other housing pieces in there. And I don't know if that was not a discussion in the task force or what, but I would like to see it broader because I want to make sure that it dovetails into our policies around market rate housing and affordable housing and all the other housing pieces that will go together to make a housing policy. And so I'd like it broad and higher level and not prescriptive in my thought about housing and how I've seen housing policies in other cities. So my thought is that it needs to go back and be vetted a little, but also that because this is so important, and it is very important, that it also goes not just through the HRA, but through the Planning Commission and to the City Council too, for input. And I mean, there's a lot of great work going here, and it'll be interesting to see some of the comments that will come out of that.
Okay. Would you like to come and tell us what your thoughts were, or a little bit about your group? Sure. Well, since you showed up, you get to talk.
Great, thank you. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
My name is Michelle Dowell, and I am a resident of Richfield. And I had joined the Housing Visioning Committee over a year ago. Met with, I think, many of you.
Yes.
And then we were asked, we did a presentation to the City Council at the end of June last year, and we're asked to come back and look at senior housing specifically. And our group has met a few times to talk about that. I like what you said to maybe bring that up a little and look at a broader spectrum. We did have, I think, a pretty narrow focus in looking at that.
Okay.
Other questions?
Thank you. What did you think of the tweaking that went on for this report versus what you had presented? Were you comfortable with it, or?
I'm comfortable with that, yes. Karen and John have participated in the sessions and I think have heard our voices and what we wanted to say.
Okay, good. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for coming.
Thank you.
Okay, well, let's get this on the table. There we go. I'm going to move that we adopt the senior housing policy to assist in guiding future senior housing development in the city of Richfield. And if there's a second, we'll talk some more about it.
I'll second it.
Okay, open for discussion.
Yeah, Madam, okay, go ahead. Go Director.
When I was reading through this this morning, I reached a similar conclusion as Commissioner Gotel did, that the job was well done, but that there were a lot of really prescriptive things in here that really didn't have the broad view. Not to say that they can't be massaged again to create a broad view. That really is what policy is about. But I really felt that I wasn't ready to approve this until the HRA had a real, perhaps another study session related to it, and I would have felt more comfortable, as did Commissioner Cotel, with having other deliberative bodies within the city of Richfield take a look at this and have a discussion amongst all of us with our various points of view on the issue.
Okay. Anyone else care to comment?
I'd be disappointed if we didn't go along with the recommendations of the consultant. We paid good money to have them come up with these ideas. We had a task force that also is seconding their thoughts and ideas. And, it is a policy, but policies can be changed. And if for some reason, this doesn't fit with what the community wants in the future, it can be changed. So I don't see any reason for not going along with what we have in front of us.
Chair,
Yeah, go ahead.
just a point of clarification, the consultant did not give us specifics about Lakes of Lindale or those kinds of things. That was the task force, not the consultant, just for point of clarification.
Mary,
So
yeah.
can I ask a question? So are you saying that it's bullet points 4 and 5 that are prescriptive, or is there something else that you're objecting to?
Yes, there's about the specifics of which projects will do what is very prescriptive, but then on the whole idea, I don't see there another bullet point that attaches this to the broader spectrum of all housing. The senior housing to other housing,
I guess
and
if
the
I,
balance.
if I can comment, I think that was their task, that they were only looking at senior housing. They were biting off one piece. And I'm assuming they're going to go back and look at the other issues that we care about.
But my problem is that it's supposed to should dovetail in there, and that I don't know that you can totally look at it one at a time in silos. I think you can look at it for a piece, but then you got to bring it back in a broader context and say, okay, does this work here too? And I'm not sure that I see that there.
Mr. Stark?
Well, a couple of thoughts. One is I did skim over a couple of things that I probably should have paid more attention to in the staff report. One is that the recommendation is that whatever policy is adopted be reviewed and updated every 5 to 10 years, and prior to the update of the City of Richfield's comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan is going to be updated in 2018, is when it's due to the Met Council. My guess is it will get approved here locally in 2017 and be sent to the Met Council in 2018. So the furthest out that this would get revised would be 3 years from now. Secondly, as has been mentioned, we're going to be asking the task force to come back with with housing policy recommendations on senior housing, affordable housing, and market rate housing, which would include move-up and luxury housing. And maybe one way to look at it would be to approve or consider this in the interim until those other documents are all into you, and then you can give a final consideration to the whole package. We're trying to accomplish a couple of things here. One is make sure we have a policy that reflects what the community wants, and the HRA is the body that is tasked with housing decisions. But secondly, we are getting contacted by a lot of developers, and they look to us for direction. And what we, again, don't want to do is have a developer spend time and money on something that ultimately isn't what you want to see. That doesn't do anybody any good. It doesn't do the city any good. And it sometimes harms our reputation with the developer. The saying, and I know you've heard me say this before, but what we hear from developers is they would prefer an immediate no over a slow maybe any day. And, so they'd like some direction.
Okay. From my perspective, I think it's a good first step to our overall policy, and we have to start somewhere. I guess I would raise the same question that was raised about which are the things that are viewed as being prescriptive
I think anything that's, when you write policy it shouldn't be quite so prescriptive about a specific place, like senior housing proposals for Cedar 2 or the lakes at Lindale. So those are very prescriptive for very specific areas of the city. It should be a broad swath across the city for those things, and it should be large enough that it can encompass those things when it's a policy. And if you look at other cities' policies on housing, you'll see that they're not usually prescriptive in a specific area like this. Not quite seen this before when I've looked at and reviewed those. So I'd like to make sure that we're not pigeonholing ourselves either by doing something like that. That could put us in a bad position for the future. Even 3 years from now, things are really picking up. We could get something there. And again, it would be always nice just to have something commented about and it's almost there, but it's not there, about the broader swath of housing in all housing types.
Okay, I guess my comments would be considering something such as senior housing at Cedar Point is not prescriptive, it's just allowing it. The other one that is prescriptive is the one that says avoid further concentration of senior housing in Lakes at Lindale, which is highly senior oriented. Now, I wouldn't necessarily disagree with that. Doesn't mean you couldn't do it, just says you'd want to think about it and have a broader range of alternative housing, I think.
Well, I think too, there's another one about there about flexibility of feasible projects to change into a different type. You know, that's a nice thought, and that was something that I am very concerned about, because in 30 years, a lot of the baby boomers will be gone. However, that product doesn't exist yet today. So putting in a policy for something that doesn't exist is of concern to me as well. Again, when I've seen other policies, it's not this prescriptive about even saying a Lakes of Lindale or that area. It's not. And so I think we're not following just good practice of policy.
Madam Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
I think if you read bullet point 3, it says to avoid concentrations and consider geography, so you could just delete 4 and 5 and the rest of it would be much broader and it would do the exact same thing. And I'd be comfortable doing that because I like a lot of the other ideas that are there.
Yeah, I think there are some other good ideas.
Mm-hmm.
We have the ability to do that. I could.
Sure.
I could live with that amendment.
I'll second that amendment.
That was an amendment?
Sure.
Okay.
That was an amendment.
All right. So we are looking at 1, 2. We're going to leave 3 in and delete 4 and 5.
Is it 4
regarding
and 5, the Lindale and the...
The Lindale,
Yes.
66 and Lindale, and the Cedar Point housing. So it just says,
that number.
consideration should be given to the location, how does it lend itself to geographic balance of senior throughout the city, and avoid concentration of senior housing, which is really what the 66 and Lindale is talking about. So,
I have a question for staff. John, in doing so, does that hinder your ability to direct developers?
No, I don't think so. You know, what I don't want to see happen, what I'd rather not see happen is, again, a developer comes to us and says, you know, we're interested in a proposal at Cedar Point 2, and then, you know, ultimately, this, you know, they're met with, oh, no, we don't want any senior housing at that site. I think the developer's challenge to me would be, well, if you knew that, why didn't you tell me that on the front end? And so some of this is trying to forecast, you know, how proposals might be received.
let me just back one out if I can. A suggestion. I like Mary's suggestion about the lakes at Lindale, because that one will speak for itself. If we take out senior housing proposals and it said should be considered, I mean, is that saying you have to, you have to do senior housing? No, I don't think so. It's not saying that. It's just saying it's an option and that we're open to hearing that option.
Again, it's just very prescriptive and not good policy. That's why I just want to have better policy.
Well, I think part of what staff is looking for is what do you want there? I mean, that's part of the whole purpose of doing this.
And that's why we sit down and
discussion.
discuss those things when they come with proposals.
You like the word can better than should?
Yeah, I'd say
Yeah.
that would be better.
Right.
Okay. I'm all right. Is that all right with the maker of the motion and the seconder of the motion? Okay, so then, with the consent of this body, we will consider the motion amended. All in favor of that amendment, say aye.
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 Opposed.
Okay. So now what we have before us is a motion to eliminate the discussion in item number 1, 2, 3, 4. That would be eliminated altogether, not to specifically identify that particular area. And the next bullet would say senior housing proposals in the Cedar Point 2 housing area can be considered, along with everything else. So. Okay. With that in front of us, I will call the question for the amendment. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed?
Opposed.
Motion carries. And now we've got the main body, the whole text, and with the understanding that this would be incorporated in part of our overall housing policy as additional pieces of it come into play after the work of your good committee out there. Move that amended version. I will make that as a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Any further discussion?
Yes.
Okay.
I still would like to see the amended policy discussed in a broader context with other deliberative bodies. I just think that in some ways it's a little bit premature for us to be making this. I liked it when somebody said interim. John, I think you said interim or provisional, calling this a provisional policy or an interim policy until we can get really a couple more eyes on this. That's just a little bit of a
Comfort level.
comfort level.
Okay.
I mean, Madam Chair, we could certainly schedule a concurrent study session for the HRA Planning Commission City Council to talk about this. I mean,
I would say, the reasons we didn't do that is really there's two kinds of decision-making that would happen on senior housing. One would be regulatory, and the other would be assistance. And the HRA is the primary body that grants assistance through tax increment or participating in grants or whatever. When it comes to regulatory, there can't be a discernment of whether it's senior housing or not. So if somebody comes in and says, we'd like to get a property rezoned for housing at 25 units per acre, I don't believe, I'm nearly certain that the answer couldn't be, well, if you're general occupancy, we'll approve that. If you're senior housing, we won't. Or so in terms of land use approvals, the age of the residents can't be a factor in determining approvals. And again, that's what primarily would go to the Planning Commission and to the City Council. So that's the reason we weren't bringing this to them.
But other comp plan stuff would. Other comp plan changes would, and some of it's around density, and some of it's around transition and shadow studies, and a lot of things we've been dealing with parking, and that's pretty impactful.
At the moment, it's a policy in front of us, as amended. And there has been a discussion that this is, again, going to be a part of an expanded overall policy, which will come back before us over time. So in some respects, it is an interim policy till we complete the whole thing. I don't know if that's
No,
what
not
you
unless
need or
it says
not.
that it is. Not unless that it says that it is.
Well, it's interim until we do something else. Am I wrong?
Well, as long as we pass it, it's passed, and it's
Okay.
a policy. So it's not interim.
Okay, but we could come back next month and change it.
Yes, we
Yes,
can.
we could.
Yes, we can.
Okay. That's a
So,
good point.
Okay. All right, so we have the motion in front of us. We'll call the question if there's no further discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
Okay, motion carries. I think that was a yes. All right, and I assume we would,
Of beating a dead horse. I'll continue the conversation. We will use judgment, obviously, here. We have a fair idea which are the sensitive geographic areas. We'll be working with developers. Our recommendation is on really any senior housing project, because there has been mixed reaction from policymakers, would be that they come forward as soon as they could with a proposal before spending too much time and energy. What we heard from a developer that we had a conversation with a couple of weeks ago is to bring something to a work session. They feel like they want to at least have some inkling of whether it works from a capacity standpoint, whether how many units a piece of land can hold, because they wouldn't want to come to a work session and say, well, we're going to propose something that's 100 units, and then find out that only 40 or 50 or 60 work on the site. So they have to engage an architect in that piece of it, and then they want to do at least a preliminary market study again before they were to come to you. What they told me was that would entail spending at least $8,000 to $12,000 just for those two things, and it's their preference to obviously not spend that money in vain. But we do, we have what's called the sketch plan review, which is a new ability to review things early on at the city level. So we're going to be encouraging people to spend as little as they have to bring something in as early as they can.
Okay, that's good to know. All right, so that's item number 7. Where's my agenda?
HRA discussion items.
Next one is any other HRA discussion items? Anything else we wanted to bring up? I will bring up one comment. I was just reading, I think it was Sunday's paper possibly, Minneapolis paper. They were talking about Minneapolis is trying to build senior housing because they've got a shortage of senior housing, and all their seniors are leaving Minneapolis and moving to the suburbs. So one person's problem is another person's dilemma. So, all right. Anyone else have anything they want to talk about for the HRA? If not, then the executive director's report.
Yes, Chair Sandel, members of the HRA. The only thing I want to talk about is something that was mentioned previously by Karen, and that is that we're working on the Realtor Workshop. And, that's one of the things that I think it's a tool that we have to kind of showcase what we have here available in Richfield. And I don't know, Karen, if you want to make any specific comments about it, but I just think it's an important tool for us to try and get visibility for Richfield.
Chair Sandel and Commissioners. Yes, the real estate or realtors workshop is this Wednesday morning here at the City Hall in Bartholomew. It's open to all realtors. We've been doing it for several years now and have great attendance. We even offer continuing ed credits to the realtors to attend. Gives us a real opportunity to showcase all of our wonderful programs that we have here and our newer programs, such as the rental to home ownership conversion program. So it's a lot of fun. We have a lot of the departments come and talk about all aspects of what happens here in the city of Richfield and why it's such a great place to live.
Okay.
And again, the reason I bring it up is I want folks at home to know that we are doing these kind of things that make the general metropolitan area know of what kind of programs we have here and what's available for them to take a look at here in Richfield.
And I assume our brand-new program that we're going to invest $30,000 on will be on the list.
Absolutely.
Okay. Anyone else? Claims and payroll.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right. We have nothing else to do or adjourned.